Hello, we are the Association for Child and Adolescent Mental Health, or ACAM for short.
Enjoyed it too. But what an amazing start. So it was really lovely. I've known Marion for years and never talked about work like that, so that was really, really lovely, and thank you, Nicole, as well. So my name is Friedmann. I'm a clinical psychologist at the Manchester Resilience Hub. I am deputy lead for the child and adolescent pathways. And I started there a year ago actually, so I was only arrived in September on secondment from MFT.
And I'm Jenni Willbourn. I'm a CBT and EMDR therapist. I've been involved with the Hub from the beginning. I'm one of the clinical team leaders. I also work part-time at Stockport Cams as well, so I have a clinic there. And at the time of the attack, I was the manager of Stockport Cams, so I've got quite a good overview of what it's like, obviously, to deliver therapy and be involved with the Hub, but also the challenges that services face as well.
Right, fab. What we might do in 45 minutes is, am I going right with these? No? So, we're going to give you a really, really brief overview of the Hub setup. I think it's probably, certainly if I'm telling you about the Hub setup, there are probably people better placed to talk about the actual beginnings of it. I think there's some very key messages though, in terms of taking messages about the setup, in terms of it being an NHS service. A tiny bit about our outreach and screening, and then I suppose what we really like to get onto is our interventions, and then kind of services we're offering, and some feedback. So a lot of our kind of presentations about some of the feedback we've had from new people. So again, it's one of the big issues with the Hub was not only the speed with which that it was set up, it's also about getting child and adolescent mental health services together, which we all know is not actually how child and adult services do not generally exist together like that. So that's something that Nicole's already kind of mentioned. So it's about getting somewhere to do it. It was about getting the infrastructure. It was about getting the adult and children's clinicians together. Lots of paperwork, and also the kind of the IT nightmare that is always part of a process like this. So there's a timeline here which I'm not going to go through, but I think the really important thing for most people working in the NHS is to see how many different people might have been involved in the setup, and how quickly staff on the ground got to a position of being able to go live 7 weeks after the actual attack. In terms of actually having a model of work, having everyone together, having had everyone released from secondment. It's a secondment model. We're all seconded 2, 3, 4 days a week from other trusts, but trusts have had to sign up to that for trusts across Greater Manchester. So, I've worked in the NHS for a long time, and that is impressive. And that is a really, really impressive setup in terms of the speed at which it was live and we were able to start doing some outreach. If there are questions about the setup, you can direct them towards us at breaks, where you can actually take some time to kind of ring us if you're really kind of interested. But I thought it may be better to try and get to a clinical focus for our 45 minutes. So one of the things that the Hub's been recognised as doing really well is obviously recognising that it's a potentially very young population that we're trying to outreach to. So there's been a lot of social media presence, outreach through the internet, through radio and Facebook and Twitter and that kind of stuff, and school notice boards as well. And it was recognised by the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, no less, that this was there are a lot of people trying to find online support, and the Hub commended for the amount of outreach we've managed to do in that way in terms of how to reach young people. So that's not an easy task. So briefly, the screening process. We have been screening people from 3 months. We have a programme of 3, 6, 9, 12 months. We're now coming up to 18-month screening, which will be in November. We have outreach to people through email, but some people have found us and got in touch with us directly, and they're completing self-report measures online, which are about trauma symptoms, they're about anxiety, they're about low mood as well. And for some of the adults, they're looking at people's capacity to work and their work and social adjustment scale as well. And then people are getting emails back based on the questionnaires, based on the responses about self-help and what to do next. And they're also getting screened in terms of how risky they seem, how high their scores are. And we were calling people back, we always call people back to kind of check in. All young people are getting called back. So regardless of scores, even if they were looking like they might be doing okay, every young person who filled in questionnaires has always got a call back. And then we had a kind of sort of traffic light system for adults who might need service, and how quickly we might need to be able to get in touch with them and just check in with how they were doing. One of the big roles of the Hub has always been, as a national NHS service, is to help people access the right services. So it's a lot about screening and triage, and then trying to find out local services to help facilitate access to appropriate services, or some of our, more locally, things like 42nd Street. But clearly it's an NHS national service, so we've been liaising with colleagues in Scotland and down south, Wales, to try and make sure people are in appropriate services. And a lot of our work has been about trying to escalate some of that if they're not in the right services. So we've got the 18-month screening coming up, which will be in November. This is our activity July 2018, the end of July. So we currently have just over 3,000 people open to us, and you can see the breakdown there of numbers. Not surprisingly, given concert, there's a lot of young people under 16, but also in the cohort 16 to 17. And these are all people that we've spoken to on the phone. They've either done the questionnaires for us, or they've just directly come to us, or we've outreached them. They haven't done this, they've done the questionnaires, and they're currently open to us. Okay, so just I think some of the sort of psychosocial issues thinking about Manchester Arena Attack for mental health professionals, anybody supporting people, whether it's new services like the Hub or existing services, is clearly there's a massive population of children, young people and families. It's a cross-generational impact. It's not just one particular cohort. We're working with young people, we're working with parents, we're working with grandparents, we're working with a massive wider community of teachers that might have been affected, certainly within families. It's cross-generational. Clearly we know there's been many people affected by grief and loss. We work with young people and families with life-changing injuries, and then clearly the whole attack that was mentioned about the high profile of the attack being around an awful lot, certainly at the anniversary as well. But you can't live in Manchester for bees these days. But there's a lot of high profile around the attack as well. Okay.
So I guess the other thing that we should say is the Hub is for anybody to have access to Hub that's been directly affected by the arena attack. So that's either, like with you guys, people that are present, people that are affected, families, and professionals, and we use that in the loosest term, that have been impacted. So that could have been people that were present on the night, not necessarily in their professional role, people supporting further afield in terms of getting people to hospital, people working in hospitals, people that are currently still involved in the investigation team or providing support, or people that are working as therapists. We're there in the background to make sure that actually we can then support them and support their needs too. And certainly that message about professionals, we're still actively pushing out there, because we know that professionals look after their own mental health quite a long time after they've looked after the people they're supporting. So we're still there. We're going to be around for at least the next 2 years. And that's a very small percentage, although it's a good percentage of people that were directly affected. We want to be in touch with as many people as possible. And we're also set up as a sort of wraparound service for local services. Like Kate said, we're national, hence the fact that a lot of our work is done on the telephone or through email, or through other sort of media like that, because we can't actually be everywhere at once. And we're not trying to take away from the provision that's already there in local services. We want to enhance that and support services and communities with that. So some of the things that we do, like Kate said, one of the biggest things is trying to navigate people's journeys through services, because in some areas it's very clear, in other areas it takes us a long time, and we do it on behalf of our young people and families, to find even the right service to go to, never mind the issues that we know stand nationally about capacity and demand. And that's not a criticism of services, that's a reality. We also know in terms of having appropriate clinicians in services, some services are very well resourced, provide CBT, EMDR, and as you were saying, a range of options. Some services really aren't, and again, that's a patchy picture nationally. And so part of our role is about helping navigate that, helping thinking about waiting times, helping trying to get the balance between, obviously service demand within that local patch, but also getting the needs met for these families and young people. So we do work hand in hand with the charity as well, in terms of thinking about, is there a plan B if we're really struggling to get people to services. So on the back of that, we also do home visits. Now they can be anywhere in the country, What we do after screening and the triage calls is if we identify a family where particularly as a family they're impacted and they're not currently in the right support locally, that's where we might go out. So again, it's to enhance the offer, not to take away from services. Sometimes that's about encouraging people to engage with services, sometimes it's about assessing the whole family's needs, thinking about who might need referring first. There's all sorts of things we do with families. I'll come back to the workshops in a minute. We also are very lucky to have some access to the arena. That's very much, thanks to the arena, but it's also very much dependent on getting the right time. So when we go back, it's very highly staffed, it's very tightly secure and coordinated in terms of security, and it's at a time when it's empty. So that's quite hard to facilitate, finding the arena when it's empty. So I don't know, do you know how many people we've taken back?
Over 100, about 110.
Yeah. So we're hoping to run some more of those days. So again, if you're working with people who want to access that, then getting open to the hub's really easy. We can talk to you, and then we're not sure when the next visit will be because it's out of our hands, but the arena is really helpful with that. What we also have to aid that though is a virtual reality tour of the arena, so that's predominantly of the foyer and what we call the donut, which is just the bit that goes round the actual arena inside. And that was done very early on, so it's as it was then, obviously not directly after the aftermath. So that's there, and that's now there for prosperity because they're doing it up again, so it's never going to quite look the same. So again, people can have access to that. We can take it out to services. People can come to us at the hub. It's very much an adjunct to therapy. We want people to be in the right place to access that, but that's quite unique. So we're happy to share that with people. And like you guys, we've done lots of work with schools, specific schools. We ran an education conference with our colleagues from education psychology. We've written packages for school pathways. There's lots of work going on. I think lots of people are putting into schools just to try and make sure that our young people are very well supported and that schools really understand the impact of this going forwards. So in terms of the big things, our workshops, very nicely introduced before by Nicole. What we're trying to do to enhance the NHS offer is something that's, I guess, quite novel in the NHS, which is to actually run sort of wider scale days and events. They're very clinical in terms of everybody's triage, they're very highly staffed, we have a risk protocol, we very much think about the staffing ratio with the young people and families that are coming, we think about potential difficulties prior to the event, and we know from experience that's been incredibly useful. We brief staff, we debrief staff, so it's a big piece of work, and our real aim is to make sure that people can connect, like you said, people can get together but in a safe environment. So our whole aim of the day is to try and ensure physical safety and psychological safety whilst allowing people to connect, which, given some of the topics of discussion around this, that's quite a tricky thing to do. So the way we do it is by actually using some psychoeducational material. So we do talk about the impact of trauma, talk about anxiety. We do a lot of work around reclaiming your life, around post-traumatic growth, where to go next, how to do that. And so lots of sort of outward focus, but lots of understanding about people's experiences. And the biggest message I think people often pick up on is that what they're going through, other people are going through too. So we were in Manchester in January, and then we run days for families, we run days for our 16 to 25 cohort, because they're quite a vulnerable, hard to reach cohort, and we also run days for adults. So we were in Leeds in April for our 16 to 25 cohort. Big turnout, so we're talking 60, 70 people, we had 100 at the first one. We've just been to Newcastle to meet with some adults up there. And again, even now we're hearing the same messages. Is what I'm feeling normal? I feel really isolated, I've never met anybody else in this situation. So even 16 months down the line, this is really, really relevant. We were in Liverpool last Saturday, and Marianne was there with us as well. Again, we had about 60 people in Liverpool, so that was a family event. Again, exactly the same messages. Lots of people still really wanting to understand their experiences and understand that in the context of how they fit with other people and connect. And we're going to Glasgow a week and a half's time, 2 weeks' time, and then we've got some others planned sort of going into next year. So it's an ongoing programme. And just trying to sort of be really responsive to the feedback from it. So we've got some of the feedback here. You can see, so stuff about safety, lots about getting people who understand. In our family day, we've really we actually split the adults and children up with a lot of support and a lot of work beforehand in terms of thinking about who might need a one-to-one, how we can, so some people have viewed the room before they've gone in it. But actually that's been really invaluable, despite the fact it causes anxiety, primarily for the parents, I have to say. The young people have very much been able to have something targeted at their needs, and we have a better time, I think, in terms of some of the daft activities we do. But I guess the parents' rooms have been really valuable too, in terms of lots of the themes that are coming out, in terms of where parents are at as a parent, but as Kate will reflect on later, also where they're at in terms of their own needs, which is probably quite a lot further down the line. So we've got that as a model, which I think we find on reflection to be really helpful. Yeah, and when we say young people, again, we've got young people from, I think 10's the youngest we've had on one of our days, because obviously we don't want them to be too anxious and unsafe, but right up to sort of 20, 25, 27. But, so these are people that we wouldn't class as parents necessarily. So again, lots of the same feedback in terms of connecting, knowing that you feel normal, knowing that you're not alone. So yeah, so this is our tricky cohort, which interestingly, I guess fits with potentially in some areas the end of CAMS and the beginning of adult services. And that transition period we know is really difficult. It's difficult for us to navigate nationally, but it's also really difficult in terms of what we're discovering is this cohort of young people don't particularly want to speak on the phone, aren't always responsive to emails, but when we find them face to face, actually they report feeling really isolated and really vulnerable and really needing support. So the lucky ones have engaged individually, but actually, I guess in terms of national service provision, this needs some thinking about, because there's clearly a need there that we're struggling to meet. So although we did successfully get a high number on our day, which was great, and I think meeting them face to face was really helpful for us then continuing to engage people. Again, very similar, lots of feedback, information about how they're feeling, meeting new people, having their feelings validated. So we're getting the same themes over and over again. And then we were very lucky, we were able, and we're going to do this with our other cohorts, to actually revisit a cohort, a subset of the young people from our day in Leeds, to see, actually, okay, it was great at the time, it was lovely to meet, but did it have any impact going forward? Because it's a lot of resource, to pull people together, even if it was a good day. And yeah, it stood the test of time, and so the people that we've seen recently we're going to check in again with, in terms of just the ongoing impact. We also asked people if they'd recommend the days, because nationally that's learning, should we want to replicate this elsewhere in the country or if another service did. The last 2 days we've run it, 100% of people said they would recommend it, and I think the lowest we got was 98%, so a resounding yes. So yeah, this was some of the feedback when we met with them. Kate met with them in August, didn't you? So people still feeling that actually it was worthwhile and it's helped them move forward. And we also got them to make pledges to themselves, and we hold them to it, and we contact them and we ask them how they're doing. And the other thing is that people at the end, the clinicians in the hub are clinicians. We're all psychologists or therapists, so it does mean if people ring with some of these dilemmas, then actually we can talk them through the steps.
That's a good bit. Yeah, no, unfortunately I can't play you. We had quite a lot of audio to play, but we can't play it because otherwise it connects with next door. They get it too.
We had the young people actually giving us the feedback.
I just want to say a bit more about this, why we managed to get some feedback forms latest, because I've been really lucky enough to be involved in the hub involved in a project with Willbourn Manchester Emergency Fund. So interesting what you guys were talking about here is being repeated throughout young people's feedback about schools. And the Willbourn Manchester Fund were really keen to create something long-lasting that was going to be educative to young people, to families, but also a lot around schools, colleges, universities. So they have funded an animation about trauma, particularly again with a focus on what it's like for a young person, what it's like in terms of recovery, what it's like in terms of school, accessing services. And so I was lucky to be part of the actual recording. So I think we had 15 young people together, who were all grouped together. We had group interviews, and then we had them all individually interviewed as well. And we're just in the process of going through about 10 hours of kind of audio footage, really. And these are the kinds of things they were saying 4 months later. That's what I wanted to play to you, this lovely conversation that young people were having about, how it was so good to meet with young people, even, a year later or 15 months later, that it forced me to, I didn't feel like I was mad anymore. I understood why I was experiencing what I was still experiencing so long down the line. A lot of talk about schools, about, again, lockdowns, that kind of stuff, what they needed, what they really wanted from their schools, what they wanted from therapy, what they didn't want from therapy. So yeah, I mean, we are hoping we just have the first edit down to 1 hour of footage, audio footage, so that's good. We need to kind of listen to some of that, and at the end it's going to be basically a 4-minute animation, so I don't know how I'm going to get that to 4 minutes, but the key ideas, all young people's voices, and then hopefully have some kind of viewing of that, and then it'll become kind of available soon. Well, subsequently in Manchester Emergency Fund to decide, but it's going to be widely available nationally, hopefully for schools, and then also for frontline staff to be used, and particularly young people were saying that it'd be great if their families could hear some of their stories, but the conversations, again, a bit like you've just done, hearing the conversations amongst each other about what they needed, what they didn't need.
Just to go back to these days before we move on, the other thing to say, and I hinted at it when I said Marianne was there, is that the other really great thing about these days is we've worked in partnership with other agencies. So we've been supported by Greater Manchester Police all along. That first day was actually one of their days, and they approached us in terms of supporting that, and then we've taken over the lead from there because it felt like it needed a clinical focus, but they've been invaluable support. We've worked hand in hand with 42nd Street and the Foundation for Peace as well, and then we've had local services. So when we were in Liverpool the other week, we've had Alder Hayes Afton Cams joined us. We're just talking to local services in Glasgow at the moment, and again that's been really invaluable in terms of sort of psychoeducation for staff, but also people being linked into other services, and for us it's doing fantastic when we hand in hand. So again, as a model, I think that's something we want to carry on going forwards and would recommend to people.
So this is a clip, or even just a still, of the 360-degree video, which is talking about virtual reality, which was developed in collaboration with Salford University and our adult lead, Alan Barrett. And so this, again, Jenny's sort of mentioned already, is available for people who don't feel able to get back to the arena but want to start thinking about the exposure to the arena, and that's kind of what it's starting to look like. Those of you who haven't been or have never even seen it, it's clad and it's been resurfaced, and everything's kind of covered. I mean, that was taken quite a long time ago now, and I think actually they've started to repair the roof as well. But so that's available, being used with, I don't know, not loads of people, maybe 20, 30, I'm not sure how many people, but in collaboration with therapists, some of our recovery work has gone out to services to work with young people and the therapists to go through this. And the feedback from both children and adults, parents, has been that it's just an incredibly valuable thing to do without having to go back to the arena, but it might allow them to go back to the arena if that's part of their journey of recovery and where they're trying to get to.
And I think the young people we found have taken to it, as you would imagine, like a duck to water. So we were all like, oh, what do we do? How do we move it? And the kids are just like, give it. We'll just do it. So that's been really fantastic as well in terms of an engagement tool. They've really enjoyed it, haven't they? However anxiety approaching it is.
So, what time are we finishing? Got 10 minutes, 15 minutes? 2:30. Okay, so we might finish a bit early. I think one of the most important things we want to just talk a bit about today, though, is the feedback that we are getting directly from families, young people and their parents about what they're valuing, what they want, what they need. And this is just straight from their feedback. So there's some shared ideas about what people want. Adults and children really value meeting others who've shared similar experiences. So our big days tell us that. Feedback is unanimous about it's really useful to meet people and feel there's something shared. They want to stay connected to people that get it. So the number of times we've heard, you just walk into a room and people get it. We don't have to explain, we just know we were there, and there's no kind of awkwardness about that. There's a kind of almost a connection that can happen. Actually understanding their symptoms, having trauma education can be a hugely important part of recovery, and understanding that it's normal, you're not mad, loads of people are going through it, and some of the reasons why. So a little bit about why your brain might be a bit stuck, why we've got nightmares and flashbacks. And they also value thinking and learning about their own self-care, so really reflecting, how are you looking after yourselves, what do you do, how do you kind of take your foot off the gas, how do you notice when you kind of need to say yes to this but no to that. So there's quite a lot of time spent on kind of self-care. And a lot of feedback is about valuing going back to the site of trauma. in a safe, controlled, supported way. So whether that's through the virtual reality or actually going back to the site, really. Parents are saying that they want to understand their children's reactions and have advice. So the days where we've split kids and parents, we've had parents in a room together, young people are doing maybe something similar, learning about their symptoms, learning about self-care and their sort of recovery and their kind of reclaiming their lives. Parents may be more focused on what do we need to know to help our kids, and what's the kind of right and wrong way. Thinking much more about family dynamics. And so young people have been very clear, hence the film, the animation, they really, really want other people to get it. They want other people to understand it's not going to be over in a few weeks. It's not going to be okay to start talking about World War II and massacres and murders even a few months down the line or later on down the line, that actually they need warning about what's going to happen. They need warning about lockdowns and fire alarms. So that's what part of the animation is going to be.
We had a classic, that came up again this weekend, even 16 months down the line, this sense that, you know, particularly in education, I have to say that they should be over it by now. They've gone up another year, they've moved pastoral teams, and one young people had a really good example, which had a timeout card with an expiry date on it, which had expired. And so, as far as school were concerned, she was now fine, and I thought that was a really poignant example of sort of where, and you know, it's unanimous, isn't it, that young people, that's the feedback we get constantly, is would you please find a way of getting that message out there. So I think, you know, we're trying to work hand in hand with our colleagues, but the film will hopefully help everybody. That will be available to everybody.
So what else are we learning, sort of a more professional point of view? Well, this is huge. Parents often neglect their own reactions to trauma while looking after their kids. Not always on purpose, but because that's life, isn't it? You're trying to get on and look after kids and you know they're really struggling, so you do everything you can. And so the days we've had where we're separating parents, again, we talk a bit about the difference. The kids are there having a laugh, talking about stuff, enjoying themselves, and the parents are often in a room of reflection and really connecting with just how difficult things still are at 16 months or 14 months. And that often the parents have seen their kids take their steps, reclaim their lives, start doing stuff, and parents might be trying to do that or masking the fact that they're racked with anxiety and worry, but they are then trying to do that too. So I think that is coming up time and time again, just the mood of the adults we're meeting, certainly the parents.
And the flip side of that, really the resilience of the young people. So, you know, when we say they're having a laugh, it's not that we're not talking about some very difficult stuff, but the bravery of these young people to separate on our days, because that's a massive step. Not knowing what we're going to talk about, not knowing the content, not knowing the staff, despite the fact it's highly staffed, but actually really seeing in action what we know about anxiety, that actually if you stay in the situation, it comes down. You know, we had a great example on one of our days where the parents at lunchtime were desperately, one parent said, was asking her young person if she wanted to go home, and she'd had a phone out, and the young person was like, oh no, I've made friends with that lot, I'm going off over there to have lunch with them. And just actually really settling down in the room and really finding that they can connect in their own way. And that's been, I think, in terms of people's journeys as well, certainly for the young people, I think that's been really powerful.
And parents will sometimes say, I can't do my stuff until I know they're okay, my kids are okay, then I'll think about me, and then I'll think about what I need. Then access and services though is the other kind of issue. Parents and carers often struggle with guilt and shame. We hear a lot of that. A lot of conversations are about, I bought the tickets, or I wasn't there, or it was their first concert. There's a lot more kind of things around guilt and shame that parents are kind of struggling with, that's really blocking any kind of recovery. Other things we're learning through our many thousands of contacts, it feels like, and calls, there is no parity of service, so it is different in different areas in terms of what you're going to get, depending on where you live and how you access the service, what's there. So there are some services who will say we can't offer trauma-focused intervention, we don't have it. Either we don't have people trained in it, or that's not our focus, or generally we don't have the clinicians to provide that service in this moment, or there might be a waiting list for it. And the other theme that we're finding is there are some services who are working with young people who are traumatised or adults, and they're not necessarily offering something that will meet their needs. They might offer something that a young person can get something from, but it might not actually focus on the flashbacks and the trauma. So it can be a supportive relationship, but it doesn't actually move them into a place of further recovery. And of course, I think it's a big theme. Very few services are set up to work with children and adults who have been in the same trauma. Yes, we have some brilliant family therapists, we have some brilliant services where family therapy is offered, but if you're thinking about the specifics of how an adult is processing their trauma, how a child is, and then how you're all interacting, there are virtually no services. I wouldn't want to say there are, there's bound to be some, but hence some of our home visits are coming about. So we are thinking about some of these young people and families where we've called and we've triaged, and we know they're scoring high, or kids doing okay, young person's doing okay, adults really struggling, or services aren't kind of meeting their need, and we'll go out, or there's other complexities like learning difficulties, physical health problems, and we'll go out and do more of a kind of a home visit with more of a longer triage, longer assessment about what their needs are. It doesn't mean we don't find the right service, but it is a huge gap. Did I ask you a question? Yes,
yeah, I was just going to
question.
really echo that, because it's a bit like in the plane, the parents need to get their own oxygen mask on so they can help the children. And I was involved in the lifespan traumatic stress service, dealing with parents and children who experience similar stress. And until the parents are sort of supported and have, if you like, detoxified a lot of their own stress and their own traumas, they don't have the capacity to take on board what the parents experience. And mental health services are totally sort of out of structure to address this need, and you've got the opportunity to discuss the need for this and how it needs to be, because the impact on parents that can actually have massive concerns that they will protect their child from what happened. And until those are addressed, and they can sort of stand back and sort of rationalise that they're not going to be able to be the help that they need to do. And it's individual, as you said, trauma-focused approach that needs to happen. Sadly, most of the CAMS teams around the country don't have the knowledge or the expertise or even the awareness of how fundamental that approach is, and they just pass it off to other people who are skimming the surface and not getting to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's plenty of services who can absolutely work with children and the trauma they've experienced, and sometimes some of the family trauma as well. You're right, I mean, but there's no reason why a service, this could just be talking about trauma, we could be talking about eating disorder services that are not set up to kind of work with the impacts on the family as well, or other services that we should be
it's
thinking
really
about
interesting what you're
lifespan.
saying about the 14, 16 to 25 year age group, because they're really vulnerable in terms of their maturity and not having a mature adult brain to deal with them. They can be stuck at 16 or whenever that age they were when that trauma happened, and they won't be able to talk about it because they're able to talk about it when they shut down. So they need, the whole, I think, CAMS needs to go up to that age and address that specifically. Some areas are looking at that, but the adult people are totally not in the ballpark of addressing these population.
I mean, what's brilliant about what our experience working in the hub is bringing together really experienced adult clinicians, really experienced child clinicians, which means you have this great opportunity to start thinking a bit about expertise and knowledge, and actually there's a lot of transferable skills, of course there are.
And when we get new staff, it's been really interesting, hasn't it? Because certainly the adult staff, we've said, pick up the phone to the family, I've got to talk about a child. Yeah, you might even need to speak to the young person, but actually, very quickly, like you said, people realise they've got transferable skills. And actually, all our clinicians, although we'd identify maybe as child or adult clinicians, work across the lifespan of the family. And the way that the hub's set up is we've just got a new round of secondments in, and we'll get another new round in a year's time. So from the four trusts, GMMH, 5 boroughs, MFT and Pennine. And the idea of that is that some of our staff take that knowledge and skills then back to their services, and this sort of new way of thinking and this sort of, a real lived experience that as the NHS we can get together and we can do something different, and it isn't actually, there are some pragmatic difficulties, but actually in terms of where clinicians are at, it works. And so I think that's been really great.
So I was going to ask if you had to make referrals for adult services for people and the family members, and how did you find that work?
Making adult
We
referrals
do
to
make
adult
adult
services,
referrals.
all the
Mental health
time.
services,
Yeah, all the time. So we have a.
And how did that sort of, how easy was it?
I'll be honest, the adult services seem better able to. They're either their training or their staffing. It's easier. It has been easier to get.
Yeah. There's still no parity across the country,
No.
and some of the key websites that you go through, you're supposed to put in your postcode, it tells you local service. We have flagged up that actually it doesn't work, so that's really quite interesting when you go to the first portal. But yeah, overall, I think because of the adult IAP model, most adult services, certainly in the UK, certainly in terms of
they've got
England
people who
have been
could do
quite
the work,
positive.
doesn't mean they're not too busy to do it.
Yeah.
So it's more likely they've got a trauma-focused person, CBT therapist who can do it, but not for months. So it just feels like there's the word for they're busy, like every service is super busy.
But then we do find sort of in Wales and Scotland things are different again, and
Yeah.
that, you know, even if somebody's just over the border, that's been particularly
So the last slide, do you want to talk a little bit about this, or should we?
Well, yeah, that was just really briefly to reflect on. Also, so I was very lucky to be involved straight away in the immediate response, and part of the role of the hub is also to input into emergency planning, because even on the ground, but also we know this now across Greater Manchester, mental health is a correlation when it comes to emergency planning. So in terms of the Pennine response, and that's the bit I was directly involved in, what we realised even on the day after was that mental health wasn't actually directly involved on the ground in the local plan. So everybody had emergency meetings and forgotten about us, despite the fact we were probably the best place to respond. We sorted it very quickly, believe me. But actually that's something that one of our colleagues is directly involved in, the Greater Manchester Emergency Planning Response, and that's something that we're really feeding in terms of supporting professionals, but also the work in schools being on the ground. So some of the things we did that we'd want to see done again is CAMS, and worked hand in hand with the school nurses, the education psychology team. We just opened our phone lines. We had a template letter that went out to schools, so we did try and capture numbers in local areas of who was present, but actually we went to the people that would know, so schools and colleges, universities, and that had our phone number on, and that was very well received and used by families, because it meant we could support parents straight away and think about young people. We also had a lot of drop-ins, and I know that was done across Greater Manchester, but actually some of that initial stuff felt really important, but was completely missed off the original plan. And the other thing we realised was a lot of duplication. So at one point, particularly in Stockport where I was, there were 3 sets of managers ringing all the schools and colleges to find out who had been present, which really probably wasn't the most helpful thing we could have been doing with our time. Nobody realised that someone else was coordinating it until slightly further down the line. But we also discovered within schools that nobody speaks to each other in a high school. So I could be talking to one person, my colleague in education was talking to another person, and my colleague in local authority was talking to another person. And that's something I think that we're trying to get into the planning as well, that actually having key people who really are coordinated helps. What we have done locally though is a lot of coordination around the ongoing offer, certainly in terms of therapeutic provision and thinking, like Marianne said about when to use evidence-based interventions, so nice recommended interventions, and when actually the assessment indicates that something else is helpful, because maybe actually the trauma symptoms themselves don't need the direct work. So just to sort of, in the background we are feeding into that, and we have had quite a lot of learning from that. And then just some of the other things that we're doing, so we said we're directly involved with supporting the professionals, which is a challenge. That's something we still really want to outreach more and more to the professionals. We also, there's lots of other things here, we're still involved in media things, aren't we? We are working hand in hand with the physiotherapy service that's been set up in terms of thinking about supporting our colleagues there, and also people that are directly involved with that.
And we're working with the Real Manchester Emergency Fund to help people for the first time ever get recognised for psychological injury, get paid for that as well, which is kind of through Real Manchester Fund. But even basic stuff like, how do you write stuff for young people when you've got an adult and young people's kind of writing letters, emails, how are they kind of being written and thought about.
And we're involved in national guidance and pathways, aren't we? And trying to link up with obviously the London hubs, link up with the work that's going on with the strategic clinical network across Greater Manchester. So we're in a very privileged position, I think, to have been in an area where there was so much goodwill and can-do attitude initially, which means that we've been able to be very effective. And certainly, like we've got people here from right across in the northeast, actually being able to connect across the country, but actually having that national viewpoint as well. I think we're very privileged.
I was just going to say, it's really interesting thinking about the emergency response. So this is where it started last year. So I was actually on call on that night, and as part of the emergency response, the diktat was that everybody who's on call was called to hospital. Everybody, and that included mental health as well, because I was on call. Not all was called, and that's how it all started really. Spent the night there with one of my training as well, and then we started thinking about it. And very quickly, this, call line was established.
Yeah,
we crossed the main national
right,
providers.
yeah.
Everybody was talking. So the planning after the event actually went at very good pace.
It did, yeah.
And started to sort of collate people, and that's what you are describing. Things.
That's fine,
And what people probably learn from it, and I know Mark is going to talk about it a little bit later, is the learning from how to do it next time, and how to prevent it. So mental health wasn't thought about very much apart from like me, but afterwards we learned a lot as to how we could have done it as part of the preparation, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think you're right, it was really effective, wasn't it? But it's making sure it's already there, planned before the event.
Absolutely.
One of our colleagues in the Adult Pathways is leading on that in the home, because of that sharing of information from night all the way through to now. I think we've got meetings and events in November, October, November and December, thinking about the bigger picture for that. But that's obviously quite localised and Great Manchester rather than it's not national.
That's true.
But again, develop a model that hopefully will then be national.
But I think you're right.
Exactly.
The learning was that the local services did get it right. That's the feedback we had. But absolutely, like you said, that line was set up straight away, wasn't it? And the gold command and the silver command, and it was really, really invaluable. But we need to make sure that can be replicated anywhere in the country, not just local.
So if anybody has any further questions, I don't know if we're doing questions later.
We can
The
do questions now.
panel later.
No, but we're having a little panel later.
Yeah, but I mean, anything you want, if you want to have a think with us about any stuff we talked about today, or any young people, any adults, any families, any clinical issues, please give us a ring. And we're there. We're there 4 days a week right now. We don't work Mondays, but we do 10 till 6, and then we do a late opening on a Wednesday till 8, and then we have some Saturday events.
And when we have screening meetings on Saturday too.
Yeah.
So that's why we've shifted our hours to make sure we can actually get hold of people. Otherwise we're just ringing people in the middle of the day. It's not really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
To be part of the advancement of child and adolescent mental health, visit www.acamh.org.